A wise man once said, big data means big data leaks. So only that is a good reason not to centralize data.
Because we cannot rely on technologies which might be exploited by third parties or by third countries.
Young people are getting more involved in organized crime groups, but the statistics don't really show that. And it doesn't mean that the problem doesn't exist.
I think organized crime at its heart is a very dynamic type of crime, and we're constantly a step behind.
Today we will discuss a number of topics connected to the European security. First of all, how technology and artificial intelligence can contribute to security in Europe, a very important and hot topic at the moment. Then how the private sector can contribute to the public sector, can interact with the public sector in order to contribute to information sharing, data gathering, and cooperation based on a concept of alliance. Then the importance of financial investigation and the financial component, how financial analysis, the so-called follow the money approach, can seriously contribute to disrupt organized crime. So these are some of the key elements we will try to touch upon today.
I think for me, the main priorities is to get an accurate picture of what's happening in terms of the recruitment of young people in organized crime. We really have to know what we're dealing with. And then I would stress that we need better collaboration within a country between all the stakeholders, but also collaboration between all the member states, because there are some good examples in some member states, but then other countries might not be aware of that. And so we need to spread awareness of what's being done so that other countries can follow suit. They can take some examples and maybe try to implement them in their own country.
For me, the biggest priority in the organized crime space is thinking about how we can better connect people and partnerships, and how we can ensure this multi-agency approach to dealing with the problem of organized crime.
I think for me, one of the important issues to tackle when it comes to organized crime is to really unlock the data that is at different organizations, that is at public organizations, at private parties, to be able to get intelligence out of that data, but whilst respecting the data sovereignty and the data protection regulations that those players are facing as well.
In my opinion, it is very important at this stage to have the institutionalization of the mechanism regulating the public-private cooperation to reinforce intelligence. And this means also the methodology that must be used by the private sector to collect, to gather, and store data and transfer data towards the public sector. And this aspect has also to do with technologies, how technologies can contribute to this and how technologies can be a medium in order to reinforce this intelligence cooperation. In countering organized crime, we need to reinforce intelligence, public intelligence, private intelligence, and how this intelligence can feed into the work of the police and the judiciary agencies.
All too often, the fact or the question whether they are allowed to share data with public and private players amongst each other is too often overlooked, I guess. And when projects are being designed, maybe sometimes people expect the data protection regulations to eventually loosen to be able to do what they intend to do. But I think rightfully we as Europeans have very ambitious data protection regulations, and we should find ways to do it inside those regulations and not looking for the gray zone next to the regulation.
I fully agree. Also, because gray zone would damage the data, because data produced in a gray zone would be not useful for police or for judiciary. The private sector operates under the GDPR framework, while police forces, they work under the police directive. So two different missions. But what the private sector can collect are fragmented data, risk indicators, whistleblower, victims. So they can provide a pre-investigative component which can feed into the investigative side if the methodology for collection and for data storage is in line with the European framework. This is what is missing at the moment. So how the private sector can contribute to the police?
There are still limits to, even if companies, for example, who detect abnormal behavior in payments or things like that, even if you have a strong intelligence agency, there are limits to harvest just to harvest, right? They really need a strategy, what they want to do with the data.
Don't expect the private sector to replace the police or the judiciary. And don't expect the police to replace the private sector. So they are different universes. They maintain their mission, they maintain their specific competences, but they can have common goals and common activities. This is what we need at European level today, and this is a real gap, because we don't have the methodology and we don't have, let's say, even the technological infrastructure to do that.
So, when you mention like finding a common goal between law enforcement and social work, well, it's not so easy. I find that social work, their main goal is working for the well-being of individuals. But then you have law enforcement, their goal is to protect the safety of the whole society. And so I find sometimes it's hard to reconcile these two goals, because while the end goal might be similar, the way to do it is different. And when you mention information sharing between the private sector and the public sector, sometimes it's not so easy, because social work, they might have information about young people being involved in organized crime, but then maybe they're not feeling confident in sharing that with law enforcement because it might lead to criminalization. So we need to work on trust from both sides, I think, so that you can have this information exchange, and the exchange should work in both directions. Social workers or even schools should be able to share information or concerns that they have about young people, that the suspect might be involved in organized crime. But then the police should also be able to share information, if there are concerns in an area. Well, they should be able to connect with schools or social services, health services, to say, hey, something is happening in this municipality, so maybe watch out for risk factors or something abnormal. So it should really like a two-direction exchange.
I think what you said at the beginning, Maxime, was really hitting the nail on the head about why multi-agency partnerships are so important, because you have this ultimate end goal of where you want to get to, but then you have the individualized approaches that they all bring their own perspectives, they all bring their own expertise to meet that end goal. And it's somewhat of a funnel where we have all of these different levels of expertise and the drive and the motivation and the tools to be able to reach that.
And I think it could be just simply as, for example, a joint training between law enforcement and social work, because they can learn together and see how the other thinks and works, and really build collaboration from the start.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think bringing in the possibilities of technology would really help us, particularly not only with standardizing our approach, but also how we can identify that technology, the data through that technology, how we can share it widely, how we can have a centralized point to be able to analyze it, with kind of the work that you're doing, for example. And also thinking about the possibilities of AI. I think AI is definitely a tool that we're going to have to rely on more and more, but not a lot of people understand how we can use it and what we can do with it. And I think that will also be part of the training exercises that you're talking about. What are the different tools in our toolkit and how we can continue to build those tools over time.
Yeah, there are some tools which can be used by the public and the private sector, as an example, because OSINT, to analyze behaviors online or to analyze dark and deep web, this can be used by both parties, by the police and by the private sector. The problem is, how do we collect this data? Where do we store this data? And then, because the quantity of data we can collect with an OSINT platform is huge, then the question is, what type of tools do we use to analyze this data, to identify risky indicators? And again, this has to do with the technological infrastructure, because we cannot rely on technologies which might be exploited by third parties or by third countries. So we must be sure that we have a European infrastructure and European platforms to do that in line with the GDPR, but also with the police directive. And this is another point that it is not very clear at the moment in the European panorama.
So now we hear a lot that recruitment is, the recruitment of young people is happening online. Like, yes, there is an online component, but we see that usually recruitment happens through like offline contact with maybe an online component, whether it's contact through social media, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. And the thing is, we come up quite often with a tech solution. I don't think it's a magic solution to address recruitment, because it's not gonna, if you have like an online strategy, it's not gonna address all the vulnerabilities in the young person's life, whether it's family stress or coming from a low socioeconomic background. So yes, we need tech solutions, but it shouldn't be the only strategy that we have.
I agree, definitely from a prevention standpoint. From a reactive standpoint, as being from the Belgian police, it's of course more difficult to analyze things that happened in the physical world if there is no digital trail of it. So for us, this digital component is actually very, very important, and the way to have access to at least insights from other organizations, data from other public, private, any party.
Yeah, for sure. Going back to what you mentioned, in the project Phygital, we identified a potential solution in what we call the OSINT, UMINT, SIGINT cycle. Meaning that we start with the analysis on social media, so OSINT or SOCMINT, these type of activities. Then we pass in the field, because people are behind internet and people are alive. So therefore you need to go to the traditional type of interview, connection with social mediators, with different actors in the territory, in the school, and so on and so on. And finally, in case you or behind a certain threshold, then you involve police forces for what we call SIGINT activities, meaning taking their telephone, analyzing signals, connection, and so on and so on. This is the cycle, in my opinion, where the two components you mentioned, so online recruitment, online promotion on one side, and on the other hand, the importance of the real life, which is behind the internet.
And when you said like to have maybe the information should not be centralized, I quite agree with that, because so sometimes you see that, you have these messages to recruit people, but they're usually quite localized. So what, they're going to use emojis maybe to recruit people, and these emojis have a specific meaning, but then that meaning might be different in another country. And so sometimes it's just hard to decrypt these messages. So if you want to decrypt messages at the EU level, it's not going to work, because everything is very specific to a country or even a region. So we really need to have a localized approach to the information.
civil society can be engaged from different perspectives for what concern prevention and countering of organized crime. First of all, in the area of trafficking on human beings, as an example, which is a typical crime introducing a series of other crimes, recycling, and all the activities connected, drug smuggling, and so on. So how the civil society can contribute and can be engaged? Because the objective, the scope of the civil society is to protect vulnerable migrants. And how do you protect vulnerable migrants? By contributing to dismantle the organization who are exploiting the vulnerabilities of these individuals for money or for power. So this is one area where you have common goals with very different approaches, methodologies, and strategies, of course. But if you don't have this, you're lacking one part of the universe. And therefore, the investigation will be late and will not provide this dimension, which is very important for that. The same for financial analysis. The first indicator for financial analysis are the banks or the notaries or people or the Hawala Center and so on. So if you want to detect the phenomenon at an early stage, you need to talk with these people before than talking to the police. So I don't know in other sectors because you manage different projects. So I would like to hear from you also, from your perspective, other fields where the private sector can contribute to it.
Well, we already noticed that the private sector sometimes also receives damage from criminals misusing their systems or just even misusing their brands. And so they actively go and search for indicators of suspicious activity, and they are keen to provide them to us. But it's of course on a very ad hoc basis that we receive this, and I think what you are referring to is to have more of an organized approach for any private institution or public institution to be able to provide something as intelligence more generically.
I think also civil society organizations really help form a piece of the trust puzzle. So when we have these organizations, particularly in the context of human trafficking or those where there's a very visible victim, being able to access those groups and get the information that will help provide that, what did you call it before, human intelligence component, I think are really pivotal to that. And they're going to be the first step in being able to access that group. Police can't just go in, for example, and get that information. So I think in these contexts where we have very tangible human participants or actors, they become even more important than ever. Lieven, I'm really interested in hearing more about your Breaking the Broker project in Belgium.
Well, so we run the Breaking the Broker project as a pilot at the Antwerp Federal Police. The main idea of the project is twofold. So in the first specific objective, we want to construct a shared intelligence framework. We built that starting by crime scripting, which is very, very meticulously describing how a certain crime is being executed. And from that, we built a data model. We try to identify suspicious patterns, so patterns that may flag us that some suspicious activity is happening. Then we link those crime scripts and that data model to different data sources. And those data sources, and then we get to the second specific objective, those data sources, we want to be able to query them, but we want to tackle the issue, as I mentioned earlier, that data is not always centralizable. So if you centralize all data, A lot of people need a lot of trust in your organization, not only to do the right thing with the data, but also protect it in the right way against other adversaries, right? So a wise man once said, big data means big data leaks. So only that is a good reason not to centralize data, amongst other reasons. And that's why we intend to develop a system that can query, or we are developing it, that can query different data sets in a privacy-friendly manner. So that means that queries that we execute on overarching data sets, they only provide the result to the querier and not anything else of intermediary computed data. So for example, if two organizations want to know whether they have common entities in their data sets. So imagine our police office and another police office. We want to know, are we investigating on the same suspects? Traditionally, the only way would be that either of those parties would send the whole data set to the other party or to a trusted third party who can then compare whether there are common entities into the data sets. But with secure multi-party computation, it's called, which is a type of privacy-enhancing technology, we are able to detect the common entities without exchanging any other piece of information that may be reconstructed to real data. And so this is why I really believe in this system. This would mean that any data provider, it can just keep its data at its own premises, and it only participates into a cryptographical protocol, allowing the querier to only exactly reach the specific question he said without any other information.
Okay, interesting, because that could work. So, there's this administrative approach idea that, the organized crime groups are using the legal infrastructure to launder the money, but then it could be applied maybe to tax authorities, maybe that could be applied to labor inspections so that they could exchange information and collaborate, I guess.
Yes. So the criminological application of our system is not fixed. So it can be a very generic system that can be applied to anything.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Can you tell us a bit about your project?
Yeah. So I work for EUCPN and ENA. So EUCPN is the European Crime Prevention Network, and ENA is the European Network on the Administrative Approach. And so we're currently working on developing two toolkits. So the first one is on the prevention of youth recruitment into organized crime. So we're looking at what's happening in Europe, because we hear, if you read the news, you're going to read that there's more and more young people involved in organized crime, that they're getting younger and more violent. So we're looking at what the situation is in Europe and what are the prevention strategies that are already implemented across the member states. And so we're going to focus, for example, on community-based approaches. What can the police do in collaboration with social workers, youth services, but also the community as a whole? If you look at young people in low socioeconomic neighborhoods, the police can do something. They can focus on the community in a preventive, as prevention and not just as repression. We're also looking, at addressing risk factors at the family level, schools, also in the online sphere, as I said. At the moment, there's not much, as far as I'm aware. I think we're still at the beginning of the online prevention aspect. But there are some things, in place. The Digital Services Act, for example, is a step in the right direction. And then we're also looking at the judicial aspect, because we see that for young people, sometimes being in contact with the judicial system can be detrimental. So the further they are into the judicial system, the more likely they are to reoffend, and we want to avoid that. And so you have good initiatives like Diversion in Ireland, where young people who offend are not put into the justice system, but they are diverted to social services to get help in a child-friendly manner. So we're looking at everything that's being done in the EU. And then another part of our work is the administrative approach. So what can we do to prevent criminal networks to misuse the legal economy? And sometimes you don't need like criminal investigations because it can take a lot of time. Whereas you have some agencies like tax authorities, labor inspections, even like mayors at the municipal level, they can do something to prevent criminal groups to misuse like legal infrastructure. That can be as simple as revoking like a permit for a business. If that business is used by criminal groups to launder money, then the mayor in some countries has the mandate to close that premise. And so that's the administrative approach. So we're looking also at what countries can do at that level. In some countries, it's not developed well, but we see that in the Netherlands, for example, or Belgium, they are already implementing administrative measures. Luxembourg is currently working on developing a national framework to use the administrative approach to tackle organized crime. So there are like good things happening across member states.
Also in Italy, the administrative approach.
Yes, obviously the Italians are doing a lot.
Well. Yeah, and I think that specifically some local police forces can strongly contribute to this. So you can create a liaison with them because we have a lot of experience in this area.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Italy is the precursor in Europe when it comes to the administrative approach. So yeah.
So Maxime, what would be the output of the project that you are doing? Do you do the analysis, or are you providing tools?
So we're doing like desk research mainly, and then we're going to publish 2 toolkits at the end of September, really to showcase what's being done in Europe and hopefully inspire other countries to maybe implement their own strategy. And sometimes, you have like a strategy working in a country and then it's going to be implemented in another country. We saw that with Kurvekrigen in Germany. And so the Swedish copied this project, and now it's Ratkurva. So it's really to help young people involved in organized crime. And so we really want to feature like the good practices of every member state, just to show that there's no magic solution. It's not like you can focus on just one thing. You need like a variety of responses because young people are involved in organized crime. It may not be for the same reason. Yes, there's the financial incentives. They can earn money through criminal networks, but that's not the only reason. Some of them might come from like a dysfunctional family, or they might not just have any opportunity in terms of education, employment, and so they turn to criminal activity. And so we need like a broad spectrum of interventions to address all these risk factors in order to help them as best as we can.
And is that part of the approach of this project as well, to identify the interventions that are taking place across member states?
Yeah, so that's what we're doing. And we're trying to focus on interventions that are proven to be effective, so that, we know what works and what will work if it's implemented in another country. So we want to promote like evidence-based interventions as best as we can.
Do you have an answer to the question, what is causing the starting criminals to become younger and younger? Because I like to think of this society as going forward generally, but this is...
Well, it's very hard to tell because if you look at statistics, well, you can't really see anything based on statistics. And I think that's one of the gaps, is that we do not have good evidence. Because if you look at statistics, youth delinquency has been decreasing quite a lot over the past 20 years. But at the same time, we hear that young people are getting more involved in organized crime groups. But the statistics don't really show that. And it doesn't mean that the problem doesn't exist. It's just that we need better data. And quite often, countries do not register like criminality in the same way, so that it's hard to compare the situation between countries. So that's really, I think, something we should work at the EU level to have like more uniform data, or at least a uniform methodology in order to be able to compare the situation.
Okay, but it might as well be that we are just putting more focus on it lately.
But it's very hard to quantify that problem. And I think that would be useful to have like an accurate image, an accurate picture of what's happening. in order to have like prevention strategies tailored to what's happening. Because if you have too much prevention, it could be detrimental. Not enough could also be detrimental. So we need to find the right balance. But for that, we need to know what's actually happening.
Yeah, exactly. I think as well, the changing nature of drug markets in this context and how localized it's becoming. We're no longer seeing drugs being imported. We're seeing them actually being made. The rise of synthetic drugs, I think, is creating a brand new market to create these new vulnerabilities as well. And with some of the people that you're describing in your population, those who themselves already have these vulnerabilities, very specific vulnerabilities, I think that also adds to the complexity of this picture in knowing who is being, captured within this umbrella of organized crime and the very changing nature of organized crime. So I would argue that maybe it's not that it's become more visible, it's just changed. I think the organized crime environment has changed, I would say.
And it's quite visible too. Like on social media, you can see, like people advertising their criminal activities. It's not taboo anymore, and it's just you have like a lot of like young groups just showing off, and that's also an issue because you have teenagers see that and they might think it's an easy way to earn money, and then it's very easy to get in contact with these criminal networks. Go on TikTok, and then very easily you're gonna see content, and then someone might reach out to you through Telegram. So social media made it very easy to get in touch with these networks.
I guess technology also enables the criminal networks compared to criminal organizations of the future, and like the mafia kind of structures with very hierarchical structures. While now it's more like a criminality as a service model, which maybe makes it more visible because you have to somehow provide the service to society or to the criminal part of society.
No, definitely. So what about you? What do you do at RAND?
We do a lot of different things, but in the context of organized crime, we have an initiative at the moment to deal with all of our organized crime projects. We do a lot of drug work. So particularly we have an office in the Netherlands, and we do a lot of port work, a lot of trafficking work. We're looking into the financial aspect of organized crime as well. So we've moved into that space, thinking about how the shifting nature of cryptocurrencies or gold tokenization is, becoming an issue, particularly across, within the EU and also across into Russia and other parts of Eurasia. A big part of our work is moving into the use of horizon scanning and foresight methodologies to kind of act as more of a predictive model to understand where we're going into the future and how we can direct resources to be able to address it. So it's much more about understanding the nature of the organized crime landscape and how we can respond to it. But I think the prevention aspect is also a really crucial element.
Yeah, we saw the same trend with the fintech. Fintech seems to be a real new trend in recycling and in different illegal financial activities, particularly through virtual IBANs. This is really something very, very important at international level and at European level.
So I think in terms of what's next, thinking about the methodologies that we have at our fingertips, but also where we can push those and how we can become more innovative in our approach to addressing the problem of organized crime. I think organized crime at its heart is a very dynamic type of crime, and we're constantly a step behind. So thinking about the types of methodologies that we might be able to employ that are much more innovative and forward thinking, such as horizon scanning, foresight methodologies, predictive methodologies, the use of AI and the possibilities of those types of technologies will really help us to drive forward our responses to this problem.
What's next? If I look from the standpoint of breaking the broker, I think in society there is a tendency that people are more aware of the data they have and of how it can be of use to other organizations with whom they want to share it. I think there is a similar trend necessary for organizations themselves, so that they can very consciently decide on where their information is available for analysis. And with Breaking the Broker, we try to put small steps towards such a broad distributed data platform that allows stakeholders of information to query it.
I think that for me, what's next, it might be idealistic or wishful thinking, but we have to invest in people, in prevention. Criminal networks cannot work without people. So we need to remove these people. How can we do that? We need to invest in different prevention strategies, early intervention. We have to look at what these networks are offering young people, whether it's money, this feeling of belonging, of brotherhood, a sense of purpose or identity, and we need to offer them credible alternatives to that. So it's not going to be easy, but I do think it's worth investing in young people and offering them a chance, a future, when it might seem like they do not have legitimate prospects.
From a Phygital-OC perspective, I think that one of the key points is to reinforce the intelligence capability of the public and the private sector together, using also the opportunities offered by the new technologies in order to reinforce, strengthen this cooperation. So this is what I think is at the moment the core. And from this discussion, which was very interesting and very useful, I understand that public-private cooperation is a key issue. It should be underlined within the European policies. There are a lot of gaps concerning methodologies, concerning how to manage data, which is another very important aspect, and how to select the technologies that might help all the different stakeholders and actors to work together in a positive way. So thank you very much for this very interesting day, for this cooperation. And after this discussion, I think we can go to work, if you agree.